Hi, everyone, and welcome to Reimagine Agriculture, the podcast where we explore the future of farming, food, and rural life across Europe through the eyes of the people shaping it. I'm Teresa Carvalho, and in this series, we'll meet people from across Europe who are reshaping the future of agriculture. Today, we're joined by Anna Frosini, farmer at Podere Montisi in Tuscan countryside of Italy and member of the Agroecology Europe Youth Network. Hi, Anna.
Hi, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. For listeners who might not be familiar with Agroecology Europe, can you explain a bit more about its work and its mission?
Yeah, of course. So, first of all, I just want to say that Agroecology Europe is a Brussels based nonprofit association. It was born 10 years ago in 2016. And so this year it's celebrating 10 years of its existence. I'm lucky to be a member of the association myself, and previously I've worked for the association as communication and policy officer, while now I'm more active as a member, and I'm also a farmer in Tuscany with my parents' organic and agroecological farm, and I'm also a project manager on nature conservation and youth leadership around biodiversity. So, Agroecology Europe has a mission to bridge the three different pillars of agroecology, which are science, practice, and movement. And the political scope of it is to place agroecology high on the European Union's agriculture, food, and environmental agenda. The association organizes events, it mobilizes stakeholders involved in agroecology, it advocates in different policy fora and events, and we also produce knowledge material on education, on farmer stories, and on policies. Today, the association gathers around 180 members who are in and also beyond Europe. And this includes more than 30 organizations, so NGOs, research groups, universities, but also a lot of individual actors like farmers, researchers. We have a lot of young people, advisors who are all coming together to transform from the bottom up our food systems. Agroecology Europe also has its own youth network, which now has more than 500 people who are involved in it. And I would be happy to also talk more about it later.
So, that's really interesting, the way that your work spans research and advocacy across Europe. And all of this contributes to supporting the transition towards a more sustainable farming and food system. But before we go any further, it would be helpful to clarify what it actually means in practice. Could you explain a bit more about what agroecology is? I mean, how does it difference or overlap with approaches like regenerative agriculture and organic farming, in your opinion?
It's a very interesting and I think very relevant question that we can ask ourselves. So I would start by saying that the roots of agroecology, the grassroots movement, which is what agroecology also is in Latin America in around the 70s and 80s. So in practice, agroecology, we understand it as the territorial implementation of the 13 principles. So there are 13 universally defined principles which were agreed on by the United Nations and its member states. And this also includes the European Commission back in 2019. So I can actually recommend getting to know these principles because they also include important matters to a lot of people working in and around agriculture, such as soil health, animal welfare, the co creation of knowledge, synergies, and so forth. And so agroecology is about connecting this principle, but really depending on the context of where you are. So this, I understand it as a systemic approach to truly transform the food systems at all levels. And so to make some concrete example, agroecology is opposed to industrial farming, and it can mean a lot of things in practice. So it's about farmers who are doing crop rotations, they're reducing tillage, they're doing intercropping, and it's about mixing crops and livestock so that we can improve nutrient cycles. It's about really farmers and their communities that are sharing knowledge, they're sharing the equipment, they're sharing the materials to become more resilient because they're more free, and with more freedom comes more resilience, which we need in times like this. And it's about the farmers who are selling their food directly to consumers. It's really caring for the land, caring for the water, caring for its people. And to me, it means nurturing connections along the whole value chain. In my own experience, it's really about being free and standing up for a better world, being there for each other, making less compromises, because you can produce food, you can nurture people and communities. You don't have to do it by using chemical inputs. So really, no compromises there. And so, for example, if you're, I don't know, a young person or maybe a more aged farmer who has been farming their whole life, and you hear all of this, you might think, wow, maybe I'm an agroecological farmer. Maybe without knowing I'm doing agroecology, because agroecology can also go silent in a way. We might not know that it's there, but it is there. And there are really spaces to engage and support each other in doing it. And one of the spaces is Agroecology Europe and the work it does. When it comes to, for example, organic, some people wonder, how can I buy agroecological products, or how can I support agroecology? Well, one of the ways to do it is really by consuming and buying organic products. They can be certified, because organic certification is really important to agroecology. And it can also be done with many non-certified but still local and seasonal and organically produced foods, which can deliver on transparency towards the community. So agroecology really, I see it working hand in hand with the organic movement and the organic certification, because I think our organics and agroecology are two sides of the same coin. And I've seen it always happening on my parents' farm, where we bought some land some 15 years ago, and we started farming it with heritage grains and olive trees intercropped with one another. And organics was really the base, and agroecology was the evolution. At some point, it was gaining awareness of what we were doing and realizing we were, let's say, part of a much bigger picture. And as regards regenerative agriculture, so I think if we understand regenerative practices in a genuine way, in a way of doing crop rotations or planting trees or leguminous crops without using the
Mhm.
harmful inputs, so chemical fertilizers or maybe toxic herbicides and pesticides, then I think that there is a huge potential for regenerative practices to contribute to the agroecological food system transformation. Sometimes it can be hard to make comparison between agroecology and regenerative, because agroecology is well defined, as I said before, and it's internationally recognized, whereas regenerative is still lacking a unique and unified and reliable definition. There are some studies like Friends of the Earth that show that some regenerative practices in the USA, for example, can also rely on herbicides and pesticides that are chemicals. So I think when it comes to the work of Agroecology Europe, it is cautious of greenwashing behind the narrative, but it's also being very welcoming and working with a lot of regenerative initiatives that are doing genuine, let's say, regenerative agriculture. So it's a bit of a long answer to your question, I think, but talking about really my own experience, agroecology for me is the inspiration behind the design and the implementation of the work that we do on a family farm. It starts with soil and fertility, but it also looks at the whole farm landscape and at the territorial redesign. So it is organic, and in my case, also biodynamic in the way it's farming. It's regenerative in its practices, because it's really about making the soil more fertile and building on that. But it's also about agroecological in its a wider scope and its dimension of a systemic change. And maybe later we can also discuss it a bit more.
I mean, thank you for your answer. This distinction is particularly important right now as we see many different sustainability approaches emerging in the agricultural debate. It also connects to broader EU discussions around how farming systems can contribute to climate and rural resilience, including within the framework of the CAP. You said it yourself that agroecology is often described as both a science and a movement. How do these dimensions come together in agroecology Europe's work?
So yeah, as I said, it's crucial to bring in together all hands on deck, in the sense that we need the science behind it, we need the practice, we need the people actually doing the farming, we need the political will. and we need a movement which is there, which is the base of all of this, I would say. So firstly, Agroecology Europe is a membership based organization, so the membership is very mixed in terms of age, profession, and geographical distribution, also gender. And this also includes the board of directors, which is elected directly from the members of the association. Every 2 years, we co-organize big forum that's moving around Europe, which gathers an ever wider variety of groups of actors. And last year, in 2025, we were in Malmo in Sweden, and so we brought the forum for the first time to the Nordics. And before that, we were in Gyöngyös in Hungary. So we moved to Eastern Europe, and we also covered other countries before. And next year, we will be in Coimbra in Portugal. So we're moving to Portugal with the forum. And this is really the greatest opportunity for me as a young professional, as a young person and a farmer, to connect with others, to localize the principles that I was talking about before. The association also has different working groups that bring together scientists and practitioners and food actors, also policy experts that we bring in as guests. And the association also develops documents, different projects, position papers, and consultations, which are also co created with different kinds of stakeholders. In short, we inform policy via science and by being rooted in the practice, I would say.
That framing is especially interesting because it shows that agroecology isn't just a farming technique. It's also a knowledge system, a set of values, and a form of collective action. And it shows how all of this connects across the entire food system, from soil to society. And considering this broader perspective, it's also important to look at the challenges facing food systems today and how they can be addressed. What role do you see agroecology playing in addressing challenges like biodiversity loss, soil degradation, and food security in Europe?
Well, I think in this sense, agroecology it's vital for everyone, for all living beings. And we've seen lately the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in, the wars in Ukraine and in Iran, the blockage of the Hormuz Straits. All of this has exposed how vulnerable the European food systems are and how dependent they are on fossil fuels, for example. So agroecology isn't really a silver bullet solution that was developed yesterday. It has a long history of farmers and scientists and movements who are actively trying to free farming from fossil fuels, starting, for example, from seeds, because seeds are most times also selected to be dependent on chemical input. We are locked in a lot of systems that require trade-offs, and we don't want to be forced to make these trade-offs anymore. Another important aspect related to this dependency is also the transition of our livestock systems. We rely on industrial livestock systems, and agroecology is trying to really push for solutions to solve feed, food, and energy crises, which are often really interconnected. And through agroecological livestock, we can, for example, recycle nutrients and reduce the inputs. And this is really a way to nurture the land, to keep the animals in the countryside, to shift to plant proteins. And all of this is something that agroecology is advocating for. And then lastly, to really prioritize real food sovereignty over speculation. So we do not wish to contribute further to food crisis. For example, with projects that are converting farmland into biofuel production and all of this. For me, it's about how to redesign agroecosystems. So the role that agroecology plays in facing on the challenges that you mentioned, which are crucial, and I think we need to face and come together to tackle them, is to redesigning and the coexistence also of the people, of the farming practices and the natural environment. I think we, as people, as humans, we are nature. We're not separate from it, although we like to think it that way. And for me, agro provides this approach and a concrete solution and action oriented path.
This really shows how a more integrated approach can help address multiple challenges at the same time rather than tackling them in isolation. To build on that, it would be great to hear how this works on the ground across Europe. Could you share some examples of successful agroecology transitions or any initiatives?
Yeah, there are many. There are many which we see happening through, for example, the eyes of the work of our members within Agroecology Europe, but also different allies that we work with. So I would say that the agroecological transformation happens at all levels, like I said before. So local level, territorial, regional, and also national and international level. And we see examples of success stories at all these levels. So locally, for example, we see it with farmers who are becoming more integrated in their communities. They're, for example, planting more trees, or they're saving more water, so caring also for the water streams and systems. They're working with, for example, traditional weeds or traditional seeds or traditional livestock, or selling their products locally or regionally through local markets. So this is what I see happening around me every day, basically at the more local level. At territorial level, so looking at the wider scale, scaling out, if not scaling up, we see it, for example, in initiatives such as the biodistricts, organic districts, or different territorial food projects, which are also called alternative food networks that are emerging in different countries. In the European Union, for example, in Italy, we have a lot of these, Germany, Spain, France, but also many others. And my own family farm, Podere Montisi, co-founded a biodistrict in our municipality, which is Calenzano in the province of Florence in central Italy. And for us, this shows really the cooperation and the willingness to change and to live a better and healthier future for my generation, as I'm a second generation farmer, and for the generations to come. So when it comes to regional level, I actually can encourage you to look at the regional laws for agroecology, for example, the one in Sicily, in Italy, or in Catalonia. But there's also initiatives like long-term organic action plan, like the one that was set up by the French region of Occitane. And all of this can be found easily online. And at the national level, for example, I can recommend checking out the work of the Agroecology Coalition's website, which is also a very important actor and ally. And agroecology is gaining momentum all over the world, whether we see it or not, but it's there. And the Agroecology Coalition has mapped many national strategies and laws across the globe, for example, in Brazil, in Tunisia, and they are really trying to make agroecology mainstream, more accessible, and widely recognized also through the policies. And we hope that European Union's institutions will also be, let's say, more proactive in this transition.
Hearing about these initiatives is really inspiring because it shows that these approaches are already being implemented in diverse contexts across Europe and the world. It also highlights the importance of creating spaces where people can exchange ideas, ask questions, and actively engage with how food systems are evolving. As you previously mentioned, agroecology also has a youth network. Could you tell us more about its role and main activities?
For sure. I'm very happy to speak about it because I'm also a member of the Youth Network of Agroecology Europe. So for me, this has been one of the most concrete ways also to get engaged with everything that I've said before. So the Agroecology Europe Youth Network is a group of now around 500 people, as I said, who are all interested in agroecology and sustainable food and farming. It was born out of the willingness of a group of young people to be more involved in policy spaces, for example, in the agroecological transformation, and to come together to really actively shape our food and farming systems. The network has reached a lot of milestones in, let's say, less than 10 years of existence because it was born after the start of the association. So we have organized two youth forum, one in France and one in Italy, with other organizations that are like-minded organizations like ours. We've published a Young Europeans Manifesto for Agroecology. We organize and we fund participatory workshops for the youth every year. Some of us went to the FAO's World Food Forum to speak at an event. And lastly, in 2025, we published the Agroecology Europe Code of Conduct that was strongly advocated by the Youth Network. And as for the policy work that we've been engaged in and we're still carrying out, we took part in two youth policy dialogues with the European Commissioner for Agriculture and Food, so Commissioner Hansen, from 2024 to 2025. And we really brought the voices of young agroecological farmers to the table, which is really important. I always say, with some sort of power meeting in a room, we need the young people to be there, and we also need the voices of the organic and agroecological sector to be there. And so we drew the attention to issues such as gender disparity, the unpaid work that's often performed by women, because agroecology always looks at gender and social disparities as well. We advocated for fair prices and for the need of land banks to redistribute resources. So all this work then later brought to contributing also to the strategy to promote generational renewal. That's been the latest strategy on youth around food and farming by the European Commission. So we shared our position in a consultation. And so this is what we've been active with lately. As for future key works, we have a lot of things planned. So, for example, on May 11th, we're going to host a webinar on Mediterranean agroecology to connect agroecological actors from a lot of young initiatives. We've mapped Greece, Morocco, Tunisia, Turkey, Lebanon. So we're really trying to build bridges and connections with other countries. In Greece, in September, we're going to be also active at the Pan-Hellenic Agroecology Forum that's going to be held in Kalamata, which is organized by fellow agroecological actors in Greece, and the Youth Network will also be active there. And as I said before, the forum in Coimbra in Portugal next year will also have a great focus on young agroecological projects. And lastly, and also very importantly, the Youth Network was at the forefront of shaping Agroecology Europe's position around decolonial and anti-imperialist food and farming systems. We have a position coming out soon, and that was also strongly promoted by the Youth Network.
How can young people get involved in agroecology and in the youth network of Agroecology Europe?
So there are a lot of ways to get involved, and everyone who's committed to agroecology is welcome to join us. So for sure, people can join the many territorial movements that are fighting for social and environmental justice, such as cooperatives, agricultural schools, training opportunities, because there are many there out there. And then, of course, you can become a member of Agroecology Europe, or you can become a member of the Youth Network itself. We have a wide WhatsApp community, which is where most of the exchanges are happening. And we're happy to have new people coming in, new energies, ideas. What people often do, members suggest funding schemes, for example, or event opportunities or partnerships. So we really try to come in together and to suggest new projects to advance the work that we already do, because most of us are already been active in this, and some of us are newcomers, and that's also really welcomed. There are also university degrees in agroecology, so that's also something that can be explored also on the website, for example, of Agroecology Europe. Many of them are sponsored there. And lately, we've been involved in what we call territorial working groups within the Youth Network, which is a new project that was started after the Agroecology Europe Forum in Malmo last year. And this is really a bottom-up approach to connect each other at territorial level. And we divided each other in South, Central, Eastern Europe, and different parts of Europe to try to enact agroecology at territorial level, which is really key for us. And for example, I belong to the South group, let's say, because I'm Italian. I'm based in Italy at the moment, although I was in Brussels with the association before. And we will bring a workshop to Florence in central Italy in May to an event which is called the 72 Hours of Biodiversity, which is a festival around biodiversity and agroecology. And with our workshop, we really want to map existing agroecological initiatives and to reinforce our connections there. So everyone is also welcome to join.
Perfect. This really brings the conversation to the question of access, how people can move from interest to actual participation. And it also connects to how EU tools, including the CAP, can lower entry barriers and support new entrants, while initiatives like yours help build the social and knowledge networks that make those pathways viable. Talking about the CAP, how does it support agroecological practices across Europe?
So the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, can support agroecology in many ways, with grants, for example, to small medium farms for direct selling or income support for mixing plants and animals, which is what agroecology does, or doing intercropping, for example. And this is also what, for example, my farm does, because we have been intercropping wheat, so ancient varieties, and mixes of grains with olive trees. And by doing so, we not only we prevent soil erosion, but we also contribute to the conservation of biodiversity. We contribute to safeguarding the traditional landscape of the Tuscan agricultural landscape, for instance. So again, the local and territorial approach, the knowledge that is very specific to a place is also very important. So, so yeah, CAP is important for agroecology really, and we need to make it deliver in even a more targeted way, especially if we want generational renewal and healthy rural areas, because we're asking young people to get on board with farming and get active again. But we cannot expect them to move to a rural area or start a new business if we don't allow them to live in a healthy rural area. So if my neighbors are getting sick or dying from cancer because they've been spraying glyphosate, they've been spraying chemicals their whole lives, why should a young person move to the very same place where the water grounds are polluted, where there is no diversity around us anymore, where the soil has been eroded? So these are all things that are very concrete, and I think the CAP needs to deliver on them. And so I think Europe can really support agroecology if the new CAP, so the new term, is targeted to small scale, medium, and mixed and organic farming. And if we invest in collective rural infrastructures, because farmers alone cannot really bear the cost of this transition that we desperately need.
So, this is where the policy framework becomes central as it shapes many of the incentives that influence how farmers manage land and resources. It also raises the question of whether the existing instruments fully reflect the kind of systemic approach that agroecology promotes. From your perspective, are there gaps in how the CAP addresses agroecology?
I think with the work that agroecology does, it tries to tackle probably one of the main issues with CAP in relation to agroecology, which is the silos thinking. There are a lot of interventions that support single practices, but instead we should also look at systemic transitions. So one example can also be the interlinkage between the nature restoration law and CAP, because agrobiodiversity is also part of nature conservation. Of course, it's not easy to work with conservation and farming from time to times, but it can also work. And for example, I'm trying to prove it with a project that I started myself on the farm of my parents. Nectar, it's called this project, and the aim is to nurture ecology, communities, and training for agroecological resilience. And the aim is really to enhance youth leadership in conservation, in natural conservation, through also knowledge building. So we want to safeguard pollinators and wild pollinators, for example. So again, as I said, biodiversity and agrobiodiversity in this case, because we're working on farm, through enhancing the features of the farm. So through enhancing, for example, hedges, or having more flowers, having more fruit trees, heritage fruit trees, and we do it via the involvement of the youth. So we want the school kids, but also the young people from the area to come and be involved in all of this. So I think it is possible. It's already happening, and I'm trying to also make my small contribution to this. And so back to the CAP. Today, a lot of small farms create a lot of jobs, and they're selling healthy organic food directly to the community. So they're really the main access point for people to have healthy and nutritious food. But they often remain unsupported by the CAP as it is right now. So I think instead, if we support agroecological farming territories, the EU can really make solid links between food security and animal welfare, generation renewal that I've talked about already, but also nature and soil health restoration.
And this is particularly relevant as discussions continue about how the CAP can better support sustainability transitions while also ensuring viable farming livelihoods. If you could introduce one or two concrete changes to the CAP to better support agroecological transitions, what would they be?
Great question. With one or two concrete changes could be first, we need a strong and ring-fenced budget for rural development within the CAP, because no generation renewal can happen if we don't have healthy and rural areas that are alive and that are free from pesticides, as I said before. And then we need more targeted interventions to systemic approaches like agroecology and organics. They have to be recognized, they have to be acknowledged and adequately supported as well. So, as I said before, the CAP should be targeted to active farmers, mixed crops and livestock producers, or specialized organic farmers, especially the small scale farmers and the women who are often also excluded from public support because they're either landless or have limited land to claim support, for example, or they're often also busy with unpaid care work and labor, which is also a very important issue that, again, agroecology also is actively trying to change, to improve.
It's really valuable to hear this from your perspective, both as someone working in agroecology, but also as a farmer in Italy, because it highlights how important it is to ground policy decisions on real, on the ground experience. Looking ahead, what gives you hope when you think about the future of agroecology in Europe?
I have hope. I have a lot of hope. I think the biggest hope for agroecology as a whole is really the alliance of grassroots movements of farmers and proactive scientists, public authorities, and more ethical businesses, because they're all parts of the reality and they're all powerful allies. And they're the ones standing up for a true food system transformation. I also think that transformation is in action already, and this echoes with the title of the Agroecology Europe Forum of last year in Malmö in Sweden, which is transformation in action, because it's already there, it's already happening. We just need to come together, and people who already see it happening can join the movement and it can grow. So this gives me a lot of hope, really. And lastly, hope also comes from my lived experience that I've mentioned before. So on the farm that my parents started, that my family started, and in our territory, change is happening. And more people are getting on board, more people are getting engaged in conversation instead of shying away from it. So this really gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into Reimagine Agriculture, part of the Recap Project, where we bring forward the voices helping to shape a more sustainable, inclusive, and community driven future for European farming. See you in the next episode.
Bye. Thank you.